Should I join as a soldier? Should I join as an officer? If I join as a soldier, can I become an officer later? How long does that take? All of this stuff are things that I hear every single week from people that are either about to start their journey in the military or that have already committed to a soldier career. What I want to explain in this video is how that process actually works, the routes that you have available to you, and why it is not as easy as you think, and it deserves a lot of thought before you commit to a particular route. This isn't to put you off, it's to make sure that you make the right decision from day one. Let's get into the video. Okay, the way we're going to do this is break this video down into 3 parts. The first part is going to be the normal route, or what I would consider the normal route for a soldier to become an officer, and that's going to be what we call the late entry route. The second part of the video is going to be the direct entry route and how that works. And the third part of this video is top tips and advice to anyone that is currently serving as a soldier or is going down that path of how they actually become an officer on the direct entry route. So if that's you, make sure you stay tuned for that bit. Okay, part number 1. I want to talk about the normal route, or the most common route that a soldier would transition into being an officer. And this is what we call a late entry officer. This is an LE, all right? That's as we know it in the military. So what is a late entry officer? Well, it's someone that has served a considerable amount of time already. We're talking about someone that has over a decade of experience. We're talking about someone that is in a senior position as a soldier, so typically colour sergeant or warrant officer, and it is very much a promotion. It is a next step in their journey if they want to continue, okay? So many soldiers will serve for 20 odd years. Sometimes it's a full career, sometimes it's a little bit shorter than that, but they're going to be serving for many, many years. And then they'll get to a point where they have basically proven themselves good enough. So they've promoted through all these ranks. They've got all of this experience to then become a late entry officer. Now, it differs to a normal officer role, and we're going to touch on exactly how it differs to a normal officer or a direct entry officer role in a moment in the next part. But what I want to be really clear on is these guys have a lot of experience. Obviously, they have a lot of military experience, and they also have a lot of life experience. They're typically older than a direct entry officer because they've served for that long. And they will commission and become a captain straight away. So they're not going to go to Sandhurst and do the regular commissioning course and then become a second lieutenant, or anything. They go straight in as a captain, and the roles they do will differ slightly to a direct entry role. I'll caveat that with different units and different regiments do it differently. For example, when I was a second lieutenant, the first gig, if you like, that I had was to take my platoon away and do a task in Kenya, which was a really cool experience. I had finished Brecon, the platoon commander's battle course, maybe like, I don't know, a month before I deployed to Kenya with my platoon. So I was extremely fresh-faced as a second lieutenant. I got there, and once we'd done our business out there, we were being taken over by the Royal Gurkha Regiment, okay, so 1 RGR. And those guys had a platoon commander who was a late entry officer. So he was a newly promoted captain. And the month before, so when I was finishing Brecon as an extremely fresh-faced platoon commander, this guy was the RSM, the Regimental Sergeant Major of his unit, right? He got promoted and then he took over as a platoon commander. That isn't common. It's just to give you the sort of dynamics of different units doing it differently. Okay, so we didn't do that in our unit, but obviously the RGR did, right? And I remember him asking me a few questions, and I was doing the handover takeover with him, and it was ridiculous, really, because I was a brand new second lieutenant, and he was like, yeah, don't worry, I've done this loads of times before. Like, this is absolutely fine. I've been in service for like 20 odd years, so cool, whatever. Guys, very, very quickly, if this content is useful, please, 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 will you just click like and subscribe and click the bell if you want to be notified next time I upload a video. All that really does help me out, and it also lets me know that I'm producing content that is actually valuable for you guys. I really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video. So typically when someone says, I'm going to join the army and then just go down this route later, you can see that, yes, absolutely, that might be available to you, but it might be a long time later. So if you're joining and you think it might be done in a couple of years and you become an LE, obviously that's not the case. You have to not only do very well, you have to prove yourself at each rank to get promoted, and then you have to prove yourself to actually become a late entry officer as well. And I don't want to understate it. It is a really, really big achievement. Obviously, these guys have had a really successful career to that point. In fact, my company commander, when I was at the Infantry Training Centre Catterick, he was a late entry officer, and trust me, there was absolutely no pulling the wool over his eyes. He had been there, seen it, done it all before. Great bloke, but there was no cutting corners. Okay, part number 2, we're going to talk about direct entry officer. So this is a DE. This is what I joined, and this is what you will see loads of people attend Sandhurst, the regular commissioning course and whatever. They will go there and they will become a direct entry officer. It means that you've basically applied to join as an officer role. So this is where you go and become a second lieutenant first, then a lieutenant, then a captain, a major, and whatever. That's on you on that career. Now, soldiers can become direct entry officers, but it's different to late entry because it isn't necessarily a promotion. Think of it as a career change. You will leave your old experience behind and you'll go on literally a different career path. So absolutely, it is doable. It's just not as straightforward as some people think. The main difference is that you have to be approved by your chain of command to go and attend the Army Officer Selection Board in Westbury. Now, you basically do briefing and main board like you would if you had a normal application and you were joining the army without any soldier experience. It kind of runs along like that, but you basically have that tick in the box from your chain of command. That's your platoon commander, that's your OC, the major, the company commander. I'm talking infantry stuff, but it's all largely the same. And then the commanding officer of that unit basically has the final tick in the box, stamp of approval to go, yes, I want this soldier. We think they can be successful at AOSB. You go down and attempt that. Now, the caveat with this is this won't happen overnight. From my time as a platoon commander, we did get soldiers down in my platoon it took ages, right? So they actually had to register an interest with me first. And I think by the time they actually got down, there was a new platoon commander. I moved on and someone else had taken over. That's to give you an understanding of this doesn't happen overnight. If you were a soldier coming to me in my platoon and you had said, look, I actually really want to go to AOSB, I might not have been looking at you through that potential lens before you mention it. So I would then say, okay, cool, look, you're performing well as a soldier, or hopefully you're performing well as a soldier. If you're not, then you need to do that first. It would now be sort of in this next reporting period, over the next year, let's look at you through the eyes of a potential officer and support you where we can. And that's kind of how that process works. So the main thing that you absolutely need to do, and we'll touch more on this in a moment, is to let your chain of command know what you want to achieve. Once the platoon commander is like, yeah, cool, I think this person could be there, we take it to the company commander who can also agree with that. And then finally we get it to the commanding officer who says, yes, this soldier can go down. That is pretty much how that process works. What happens next is you go and do the Army Officer Selection Board. And if you're successful there, you then go and do a regular commissioning course at Sandhurst. That is the normal course. That is the 44-week course. You put your rank to one side, you leave that behind, whether you're a sergeant, whether you're a corporal, whatever, you leave that to one side and you basically go and do the commissioning course as an officer cadet. Clearly, you'll have a lot more experience than all of the officer cadets there, so you will naturally appear as some sort of leader. Okay, so I'm not understating the previous experience. I'm just giving you an idea that it's kind of parked. You're now on this new trajectory. And once you promote, typically you'll become, it depends on your length of service, to be honest with you, whether you are a second lieutenant or captain. You might not be a second lieutenant, and I actually know a couple of people that were senior, so they were like sergeants when they chose to become a direct entry role, and they basically picked up captain really, really quick. So sometimes the career path can change a little bit in terms of the timelines, but my point for this is that you will go on this trajectory. Okay, you're not a late entry officer. And in terms of the jobs available, most of the time, think of it gonna be platoon commander or troop commander, and then you're on that path. Many soldiers might go back to their previous units as well. especially if you've served for a number of years and might have done a lot of operational tours and really good connections with your old unit, then they might be like, yeah, we know a lot about this guy. It's a really low risk because we know he's good. So absolutely, we're going to give him a place. He or she can basically come back and serve in the unit. But it's not always a given. Sometimes you'll go there and you won't get back into the unit because you have to go through the whole RSB selection, the Regimental Selection Board, as a standalone thing. So the point to remember here is you can't bypass your chain of command. You have to get their approval. It has to be recommended on your report, your SJAR, the Soldier Joint Appraisal Report. And the final part underpinning all of that is you have to have been good. Okay, you have to have been good, got a good relationship with your chain of command so that they can suggest that you could go down on this thing. Okay, part 3 for this video, we are wrapping up with advice and top tips for anyone going down this soldier to DE route. The first part is, if you have committed to a soldier route and you are currently a serving soldier and you want to become a direct entry officer, you need to let your chain of command know as soon as possible, because you might go into that meeting and that platoon commander might turn around to you and say, actually, we don't think you're good enough right now in terms of your actual role. You need to become better at that before you go and do this. You basically need to let them know so that they understand your motivations and your own vision for your career. They might turn around and say, yeah, actually, completely understand. We think you're a good fit, but you need to have that conversation early. Okay, the next piece of advice I want to give is that AOSB, the Army Officer Selection Board, is not a battle course. If you go down to the Army Officer Selection Board, you're being assessed as a potential officer. You might have done courses before. This will work slightly differently. They will expect a little bit more from you because you are a serving soldier. You understand the values and standards. You get how the army works. You've probably seen good officers and bad officers before. What makes you want to be an officer? They're going to really care about your motivations, particularly if you already have rank on your side. If you're a corporal or a lance corporal, you are in a position of leadership. Why do you want to change this trajectory of leadership that you're on to go to this trajectory of leadership? What is different about that excites you, and why do you think you can be good at it? You need to really understand that part before moving any further. Also on this point is you need to be comfortable in the environment of mixing with other officers. It doesn't mean you have to be cut from the same cloth. I know that many aren't, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that person's going to be a good or bad officer. But what is important is that you are essentially swapping the soldier route for an officer route, which also means living in the officer's mess, having a new group of friends, that type of thing. Like, is that the right choice for you? And some people I know absolutely could have made the shift. They could have stayed on and become a late entry officer. In fact, I did a podcast recently with Steve who absolutely could have done that if he wanted to, but chose not to because he wanted to remain a soldier. And on the AOSB point, I think it's really unwise to go there and just rely on your previous military experience. You need to think about how you're going to communicate with other potential officers and also practice the assessments that are coming up. That's a big thing. And the final part of this is that different units support their soldiers differently through this process. I've worked with a lot of soldiers going through this now. Some are very good at coming forward and going, yes, okay, we're going to support you. We're going to give you some Plan X prep, or, teach you on the planning process a little bit. We're going to let you polish up on your presenting skills, or, come and chat to other officers about kind of whatever it is. They're going to support you a little bit more. Other units do it differently. They might just go, okay, cool, over to you to go and do the heavy lifting here and prepare. I'm not saying, well, actually I am saying, obviously you want the former, more support is better, but not everyone will get that opportunity. Okay, guys, that is it for this week's video. I hope that's been really beneficial. As I said, I work with a lot of soldiers that are going through this process. I know it can be confusing, so hopefully that adds a little bit of value and clarity on what might be best for you and how the process works, and really take that top tips and guidance on board, because I see this all the time. I really, really do. And look, many soldiers go down and they are successful because they're clearly, very, very good at what they do already, and they're ready to take that next step. But many go there and suddenly get a little bit alarmed at what AOSB is like, because perhaps they haven't mixed with this type of potential officer cohort much in the past, and it's kind of new to them. You want to do as much as you can to break down that barrier. I wish you the very best of luck. If this has been useful, please click like, please click subscribe. It really, really does help me out. I mean that. If you've got questions, put them in the comments box below. See you next week with a brand new video.